Okay, about to get started, folks. For those of you who joined us, welcome to week one of our 6 weeks of the 6 modules of commercialization. I'm just now checking my chat. Um, Hi to everyone. Hope you can hear me. I'll just do a quick noise check for those of you who can hear me. Just say hi or loud and clear, whatever. Just let me know you can hear me as I talk now in the chat box you've got. If for those of you who can see the chat box down there, all good. Okay, looks like we've got sound. That's a positive thing. So today we're going to be talking all about. I first want to give you an overview of the 6 steps, and then I want to talk to you about one step, which is the first one, ideation and modelling. Now, first, before we do that, I need to point out that ideation modelling is something everybody does, but the emphasis has always been on the ideation, and you tend to gloss over the modelling. And I'm going to show you why focusing on the commercial model before you start is so important. The best time to start your commercial modelling is before you start your project. The second best time is right now. Whatever you're doing, you need to stop and go back and revisit your commercial model because it's very important for you to know that you're going to do this right. So I'm now going to share my screen with you and we'll go through this, and I'll come back when I have some stories to tell you because it's important that I share some of the experiences with you as we go. So there we are. Today, as I mentioned, it's step one, how to use the 6 steps to commercialize inventions in months instead of years. And in this case, it's ideation and modeling, step one. So let's jump into it. Now, what we're going to present here is a 30-minute overview of what I do normally as a 3-hour module in our 2-day workshop. We haven't done 2-day workshops for over a year now because of this COVID thing, and I don't expect to do them until towards the end of this year. So for those of you, that's why I've made this free, so you can at least get a jump start. Now, it's not comprehensive. We usually only share 2, 3, 4 different points each time. It's a little bit of learning, but it's good for you if you're just getting an introduction to it and getting an understanding of what it is we do. Okay, so let's look at this. Today, step one, ideation and modeling, as I mentioned, and we're going to try and walk you through the commercial modeling process to understand the difference between that and building a fancy product and putting left-handed handles on instead of just right-handed handles or something like that. That's your ideation side of it. How do we work the product? This is completely different and most important. Okay, first I need to give you a background on the 6 steps. So I want to spend just a few minutes going through the 6 steps with you. I won't cover step one because of course we're going to do that now. But before I do, I need to give you 2 pieces of information. Commercialization is a linear process. Starts with A to B, B to C, C to D, D to E. Sometimes you think you jump over some steps when you get to learn these steps, but in fact, you're not jumping over them. You'll actually get dragged back to fix them. And if you don't, they become roadblocks. If they become roadblocks, 2 things can happen. In fact, 3 things. 1, it can crash your project completely. Secondly, it'll realize less value at the end of it. Or thirdly, it'll slow the project down. And there's nothing worse than a project that can be done in 3 months taking 2 years. And I've seen it so many times. I've had projects 7 and 8 years. We've ended up on my doorstep and we've been able to solve the problem and get it commercialized in 2 or 3 months. So the second thing you need to know is at each of these stages, there's a roadblock in front of it. It becomes a roadblock if you don't deal with it. If you know what's coming and you plan around it, you don't have to worry about this roadblock at all. So it becomes just one more part of the pathway, one more stepping stone. And that's really what I want to get you to a point where you know what's coming and you plan it accordingly so your project becomes fluid. It doesn't stop and start with the amount of money you've got, the amount of time you've got. It just continually moves along so it commercializes in months instead of years. Okay, so what does it look like? Firstly, we've got ideation and modeling, which we're going to cover today. I don't want to go into that too much here, but then we've got ownership and protection. Most people think of this as, oh, I need to rush out and get a patent. But in fact, that first step is well before it. And if you don't do that, you're going to be wasting money because you don't know whether or not the patent you get will be worth any money because you don't know what the demand is. You don't know what the profitability projection is going to be. It's great for you to say, I could sell 1 million of these or 2% of the automotive market is worth this. It doesn't work like that. You really have to know your people's propensity to solve the problem and to spend money to solve the problem. We work through all of that in the ideation and modeling, but in the ownership and protection, we focus you more on delaying your patent, but writing up your provisional and getting ready but we tend to use other tools such as waiver of rights, non-disclosure, confidentiality deeds, all of this sort of stuff that comes into it. And we catalog those and file them in our due diligence file. But more importantly, we can put off the patent safely until we're ready to go. When we've done our presentation for money to somebody who's obviously signed an NDA, we then, before we accept it, we show them what the patent's going to be, and we lodge it the day before because it gives us 12 months. That 12 months is critical, which you'll see in stage 4. Okay, funding. A lot of people fall down here, and I tell you, we can do this in 2 weeks. Our process called 10-4-1, we identify 10 parties, and they're not people, they're not high net worth individuals. They're catalogued completely differently. We do end up preparing 4 pitches, and we will get from there, if we do 1, 2, 3, or 4, you will get at least one offer. So 10-4-1 has worked for me since 2016, and it's greater than 95% successful. And there's a reason for it, and you'll see that in phase 3, in workshop 3. The next one is the most overlooked, and that's transitioning. So you've now got money, you've been in R&D all this time, you now have to jump out of R&D and go to commercialization. It takes a whole different skill set, and you can't afford to hire 20 people to do that. But the pressure on you is, well, maybe I can do it. I can learn how to do all these services like legal, accounting, finance, HR, production, coordination, negotiating, procurement, everything else. It's just impossible. So if you think you can do that, think again, because you're using other people's money to get you to a destination which is cash flow positive in 12 months. And if you try and do that yourself, you're going to take a lot longer. So what you need to do is not hire 20 people, but really contract 20 precise people with an option for them to jump in if they're good and if the project does what you expect it to do. So sometimes they just get paid in equity shares. Sometimes they get paid small amounts of money for time they spend on it. But most importantly, they have a healthy exit. They've signed NDAs and they are working, doing the legals, doing the finance and accounting, doing the HR, or everything you need. You've got somebody who's expert at it doing it for you. Don't try and do it yourself. Learning on other people's dimes, those other people won't be too impressed with that. Next is scaling. Once you've got a project that reaches cash flow positive, you've now got a choice. What we need to show, and it's very easy to do at this stage, raising money for scaling is a lot easier than funding a commercialization, early stage commercialization. And what we do is scaling is we turn, let's say it's $5 million a year, we turn that into $5 million a month. And there's separate skill sets that are required to do that. And it's not that difficult. It doesn't mean you open 20 stores. That's a recipe for disaster. If you notice franchises, they open one at a time and they get that running and they get it going. That takes too long. So when you're scaling, you need a different skill set. That skill set usually comes from private equity funds, venture capitalists, and other experts in the field who will demand quite a piece of your action to do it. But if you get the right person, it's well worth doing. Those people are siloed into industries, like for instance, in step 5, I show you how one did in aviation industry. And these guys had an aviation product, and we got an aviation venture capitalist, and they got a Boeing contract just like that. That project IPO'd within a year. So that was quite nice to do that. Now, 6 is the exit. Exit doesn't come at the end. Exit has to be planned at ideation and modeling. So it's a little bit of a misnomer there. When we do ideation and modeling workshops with people, we always do the exit with them as well. We need to understand for them and for any investors at the funding or at the scaling stage what the exit will be. And I can tell you the exit has to be at pre-scale for the funder, because the people who come in on board for scaling your project are going to have their own exit. Absolutely no venture capital company will come into your project without an exit. So an exit doesn't have to be a sale. It could be a value realization point where you stay on board with the project, and we show you lots of different options there. Okay, so that's the 6 steps. Now we're going to focus only on one step, which is step 1, ideation and modeling. And today, because of time, I'm going to share just 4 things with you. And that hopefully will give you a bit of a boost and a taste, an appetite for what we do with the way we do these 6 steps. Okay, first I want to explain to you, your true value is in the commercialization model and not in the product. A lot of people fall down on that, and I'll show you why. Now, I'll also show you how an outside-in process will save you money if it's done before you take on investors. So, and before you put your money in, you need to look at the outside in and work backwards from the people with the problem. Next, I'm going to help you understand and document the issues that you can't control. These are things outside of your control, but will impact on we call them environmental issues. And there's lots of them. And if you don't have a policy or a procedure for mitigating those, reducing those, countering those, then any investor, particularly the investors that I'm going to guide you towards, will opt out of your project because they know your industry and they know that if you haven't addressed those, you don't understand what's coming. And finally, I want to show you why you need to have an exit mapped out before you get going and how important that is. So the exit is for you, but not necessarily. It can also be for the person who comes in at commercialization, early stage commercialization, and gives you the funding to get you to cash flow positive. And it can also be the scaling person. But if you don't have an exit mapped out, you're really just floundering along. You haven't got a project, you've got a job. And unfortunately, some people enjoy that, but you're not going to be better off than what you are, particularly as you've now loaded all your business insurances and risks onto your family rather than onto your previous employer. Okay, so just only those 4 points will be handled today. So now, before I do, I'll give you a little bit quick story about Peloton and why the best opportunity I've ever seen didn't get off the ground. So this is an important lesson for everybody on the ideation and modeling. So if I just give it to you in a quick method, this company, Peloton, was a group of 4 individuals. They were very, very clever people. They all had Asperger's. That's really what pulled them together. And they were very vertical thinkers, but not lateral thinkers. And they're quite detailed and they could drill down to a problem and solve it very carefully and very cleverly. And they didn't take that long to do some of the projects. Now, these guys set out to write a computer programming code language. So they would be able to do programming they set out to do it in 10% of the programming lines would take to do a normal command. They would do it in, or a normal code to write a program. They could do it they wanted to do it in 10%. They did about in 22%, I think they did. So there was a huge reduction in the commercialization, in the code required for programmers. But then they decided, one of the guys had been traveling and being Asperger's, he'd learned 27 native languages to read, write, and speak these languages. So I'm telling you, in terms of intellect, these guys were off the tree, but they were a whole different level. And their ability to think and process information was absolutely like computers. But they decided to incorporate his learning into their programming by being able to flip their program into 27 other native languages. So they had 28 languages. So if you were, let's say you're Korean or you're Pakistani or African, some of the African countries, they mostly did Swahili, but they did Urdu, Hindi, Korean, Japanese, Kanji, French, all these 27 base languages. And then from there, they were able to, if you were to write your code in English, which every code is written in English, I don't know whether you realize, but your TV arrives from Japan, the EEPROM is coded in English. And what they thought was the people in Japan don't understand English. So how do they code it? They actually go to coding districts and get it all done. They storyboard the whole thing. They take it to a coding district. Somebody gets usually 2 and 3 man businesses on the corner of these coding districts. Buildings are full of these 2 and 3 and 4 man coding companies, and they just take it, write the code, pass it back. Those guys then test it. Yeah, all fine. Thank you. Done. And it goes, the EEPROM goes into a handset, a remote control or the TV, and you could press a button and it happens on the TV. Great idea. But what if you could do that in Japanese? If they could understand and code in kanji, they would have no issues with language. And language can be, particularly English, can be very difficult. Just as a classic example, the word reverse. Reverse can mean turn around, it can mean go backwards, it can mean flip, it can be invert. There's a lot of meanings for reverse. And if you're programming and reverse is a word in programming, what do you have? How do you interpret it? Well, it's pretty hard if you your native language is Hindi or Russian. So you have to get a pretty good grasp of English to do a very good programming job if you're copying and lines of code to save time. So as a result of that, these guys thought, we'll flip it into, even Korean across the page that way, Japanese downwards. Yep, we can do this. And they did. And they did full set Chinese characters. They did it all. So, but when they got the project ready, came along to me and said, let's get this out. Two things we learned. One was they hadn't explored their market, and their market was quite finicky. In fact, I can tell you now, programmers out there are very tribal. Tribal markets are very hard to connect to because they don't change from what they do. They're loyal to what they grew up with. In particular, if you cut your teeth as a programmer on C++, you're not going to learn Fortran or COBOL or anything else. You're going to stick with what you know. And if it doesn't do everything you need, you're going to make it. You're going to work and expand on that code until it does what you do. And that way, that's how codes are expanded. People plug in and try different things, and eventually they work out it can do this, and then they pass it on and everyone networks. And that's how the tribes evolve. So great thing, but not good for these guys, because when we tried to say to these guys, $1 a year license, you could learn to do this and flip it into any other language. The guy said, we're okay with COBOL, we're okay with Fortran, we're okay with C++. We don't necessarily want to learn another language. And as a result, didn't have a market. So then we looked at the education market, and the education market looked pretty good. We got all the way to the, almost to the Politburo representative in China for the education. And the end result was they knocked it back. They said, no, our schools are behind. Our people are behind India because of language. So if we can't make our language prime in the world, we're going to make English included. So therefore they have to learn English, and therefore they should program in English. So we got it knocked back. So big problem. Best product I've ever seen. Couldn't get it off the ground. And the way we eventually made that work is we sat down, we were doing project status review meetings every 3 months, and that went to 6 months because nothing much was happening. And I said, look, guys, about the second year into this failure, if you like, I said, let's use the code to show people how effective it is by writing a program. So, and then people would see, well, this is pretty good. I get to write a program and it works, and look how short it is and how effective it is. So they said, okay, what do we write about? What program can we write? And I said, well, let's focus on a problem and let's make it a business or commercial problem, not a consumer problem, and solve it. Something that hasn't been solved that you know you can do. And when you hand it to people, they'll say, at last we've got it. So we went off to solve a problem, and these guys had to work out what the problem was going to be. So I'm forgetting these guys are all Aspies. So they sat down to their computer and Googled business problem. And they came up with probably one of the best, and it's called the Wanamaker paradox. For those of you who know about the story of John Wanamaker, he owned a very big department store in Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. I think he was the first department store in the 1920s or 1918s, 18s, 19s, I think. This product was his thing. He took over a very grand old railway station, put floors on it, and built his own department store out inside it. And it was huge and really, really good. People flocked from states just to come to this department store because it was a novelty to shop and get one store getting everything you wanted. So he was doing quite well, but he made a statement in 1903. He said, 50 cents in every dollar I spend on advertising is wasted. I just don't know which 50 cents. So that became known as the Wanamaker paradox. And I can tell you, ad agencies are hidden behind that for centuries, over a century now. So the way they've done that is we don't quite know. So we'll throw everything and we'll give you a good mix, and we'll make TV ads, and we'll run internet stuff, and we'll billboards and all that, and we'll build momentum. We just don't know which one's being wasted. So these guys thought, we can solve that problem. We don't know how, but we will. Well, they solved it in about probably a month and a half. And it was because of new technology with digital phones. And the way they did it was very clever. They wrote a software package which wasn't that big and it wasn't that significant, but it sat in the same computer as the CRM for this company. And we trialed it out on a roadside service company, which is like an organization. It was non-profit, but it was members only. But it was quite elaborate. It had 27 different product lines. Sorry, 21 different product lines and 27 different media that they used. Now, breaking down media to Wednesday newspapers in their city and Saturday newspapers in their city were different. So they had billboards and they had walk-ins, they had advertising on the internet, they had advertising in magazines, they had, you name it, they had it. And they went for 27 different media and 21 different product lines, including roadside service, mechanical services, inspections. They had travel, they had loans, car loans, they had home loans, they had, you name it, they expanded out to all these different things. And they wanted to know where they're wasting advertising money. So what these guys did is they wrote a program. So when every billboard, every advert, everything had a different number, they bought 1,000 numbers from a digital exchange. And so the first one might have been 555-2345, or sorry, 555-0000 to 555-9999. They allocated those numbers. Every different ad had a different number. But when they came into the CRM recognized the number and held it. And if the person, the telemarketer, then opened a CRM file for that person, it dropped the number in and said that's where they came from. So they were able to determine where the advert came from. And some of them, like billboards, they learned didn't happen for 4 months. Some of them happened 3 months after the billboard was taken down. But they were able to time that whole thing. The only one they couldn't get was walk-ins. But because it was singular, they then knew. So what they did is they added into their CRM a charge box that said, with the girl sitting at counters, when someone walked in, they said, okay, we know it's a walk-in, bang, there it is. So they solved the Wanamaker paradox. Did they make a lot of money from ad agencies? No, they didn't. Ad agencies hated it because it made them accountable. But the media buyers loved it. And although there weren't many sales, they could charge a very high price for that product because the media gurus, the media buyers could go in and say, we want to cull $80 million from your advertising budget nationally and use it over here, just 40 million over here. So you take 40 million and keep it and give us 40 million, we'll put it over here where it's working. And we know we're going to expand what you got. That's a pretty big win for them. So we couldn't quite work out how we could cut to get extra of the savings, some of the savings, but we actually did it on a monthly price and then scaled it up based on customers. So really good, careful use of the thing, but it took 2.5 years to get that project going and pay for itself. It does very well now. Those guys are past it. They're onto other things now. But in terms of Peloton, the product with the being able to flip into 28 languages, it's sitting there languishing. No one's touching it. They had one offer from from Russia, and they didn't want to go. The Russians wanted them to move there and live there, and they said, well, we don't know that we'll ever get out of there if they realise this has military implications, so we're not going to do it. So they didn't, and I think that was sensible. I don't think that Russia would have any problem with it, but these guys have families and they just didn't want to uproot them and take any risks. So that gives you an idea of how really good products don't work if they have a really bad commercial model. And explaining that in another way, if you've ever watched the Shark Tank show, you'll know that sometimes the least attractive projects or products actually get the funding. And the reason for that is they've got a great commercial model, but they don't come in and give a commercial model. They come in and make a pitch. The sharks are the people grinding away in their minds, what commercial model fits this best? How is this going to work? Now, they won't share that with the operator, with the owner of the IP, because that's where the value is. They want to score the deal. Then they'll say, this is how we're going to do it. So make no mistake, the value is in the commercial model, not in the product. So when you're doing ideation and modeling, ideation is important, modeling is far more important. Okay, so let's get back to this. So first option I'm going to give you is the value isn't in the product, it's always in the commercial model. I've just explained that for you, so I've jumped myself there. very important that you realise that spending a little bit more time on that commercial model, and I'm going to go through some of the things that are in that commercial model, but we have a complete rundown of that. When we run commercial modelling workshops, which take a half a day, we do a little bit of research before that day, and we have a lot of write-up, but we cover off about 240 different points. So we ask 240 questions, and it blows out to a mind map with around about 400, usually about 400, anywhere from 320 up to 450 different options or positions that you can take. And the idea then is we will Sharpie get stuck into those once you print it out on an A2 or something, and you start knocking them off. So that's important to know, that all those options are there, but you need to close doors, because having too many options is just as destructive as well. So commercial model, know your options, but more importantly, work from the outside in, and I'm going to show you that. Here's how we pyramid the process. We start with the problem and the way that the people who have the problem solve it. Who has the problem? How do they solve it? How much do they pay to solve it? If they don't pay to solve it, what happens with, how much do they lose? Does it cost them money, or can they live with it? There's a whole lot of things you have to balloon out. That's why this model here is basically on commercial and industrial. It's not so much consumer, because consumer can sometimes be an emotive purchase, and that's different. So we start with the problem and how they solve it now. Then we look at their solutions and what the solution you're going to offer, and also what are other solutions. And solutions can radically differ. For instance, if you're in San Francisco and you want to get to Bay City, your solution to get there might be Uber, it might be taxi, it might be train, it might be helicopter. You've got a lot of different options that don't compete against each other, but they're all transport. So, and they're all different pricing. And somebody may need a helicopter because there's a news event happening there, and they need to get from downtown to Bay City in 1 minute so they can film this. Well, guess what? Helicopter is your best option. So you need to know and what the other options cost, and how they would be applied. Where they buy them from is just important. So when we go to the next one, where would they seek to solve the problem? So if you want to know that they're going to Lowe's or one of these hardware stores, or they're going to go to a consultant, or they're buying it from a tire place, a tire manufacturer, or outlets, you need to know where they shop. So to solve this problem now, because that's probably your channel to get in to solve the problem for them now, later. And that also represents the group who may end up investing in this project. Then you have to look at start to work inwards now to resources and skills required, making sure that you can get your hands on everything you need and you've got all the skills. You don't have to buy them. You don't have to buy the machines that were required to mill a mold, for instance. You outsource a lot of that, but you need to know where you're going to go, because you need to know that it's a viable, you can get to a minimum viable product. And finally, we work on pricing and costing. That's very important, because if you can't make it for less than your competitors, can you be competitive? And also, if you are charging more and you've got a premium product, that's fine, providing it is recognized or perceived as a premium product. And remember, when people make a purchase, perception is reality. Reality isn't reality. If your product isn't as good, you may not, you may be able to command a higher price if it's perceived as better. An example I would give you is if you drive a Ford Mondeo, you actually drive a Jaguar. It's the same car, different body on it. Now, that might scare you if you've paid a lot of money for a Jaguar, but you're going to get the same reliability out of the Mondeo. So there you go. Okay, let's keep going. Option 2 now, we're talking about researching the industry and the market. This is most important for you, because when you need this for you to mitigate any risk before you start looking at patenting or protecting this product or this project. You need to understand that there is a demand for it. People will have a propensity to pay to solve the problem, and the amount that you're going to be charging them is significantly more than it's going to cost you to make it, and that they'll buy it, and how often they'll buy it. So number of people who buy it, the frequency of sale, the cost, and what else they'll add onto it when they buy it, and then finally how you can reduce costs later on. Well, these are all critical things for your commercial model, and if you don't look at them, you're going to come unstuck later on. So researching the industry and the market, you should outsource this because you're going to be a little bit too close to it, I would suggest. So the way we do it, we format this up. So you're looking at three things here: comparing existing solutions, that's important. And you're looking at summary of these resources and skills required. I've talked about that. And you're talking about pricing and costing. They're the top three levels of that pyramid. But the way we're doing it is we're starting out here in the industry, all these competitors and partners, prospective partners. And we're also looking at the market with all these buyers and users and how they would go about it. And buyers are separate from users, particularly when you're dealing with major corporations. The buyers are in one place, the users are in another place. Convincing the users doesn't always work. You have to, and that's why when you're selling to a mining organization, you have 6 different presentations you have to do, including the solution at the pit for the guy who's working it. You have to do a presentation and show him it works better than anything else. But you've also got a logistics presentation. You've got a engineering presentation, show that it's going to be reliable. You've got a pricing, costing, maintenance, and annual life of the project for the procurement guys. You've got funding and finance and costing and savings for the finance guys. And then you've got a corporate decision and you've got others. So you need to be aware of those and understand that the buyers and the users are 2 different parties and can be 6 different parties when it breaks down. So designing the product really is not at the beginning, it's actually at the end. But I put it to you that it's at the beginning and at the end. You need to do it both. Okay, so understanding that, getting that format, working it through, making sure. Now, one of the short ways of handling buyers and users is to, if you've got an easy product to understand, and the example I use is, let's say I've built a new wheel alignment machine and I want to sell it. The best place to sell that is tyre places, of course, independent tyre places, so they don't get told what machine they have to use. And I would suggest having a corporate lunch with 5 in each city, for doing 2 or 3 cities, 5 different people who are competitors with each other. Come to lunch, we're going to talk about your wheel alignment and how you work it. I don't have to talk about my machine at all. I'm not talking about the machine. I'm talking about the solution to their problem, which is being able to deliver a $99 wheel alignment instead of a $250 wheel alignment, and how that's going to impact on them to get them more customers through the door, and how if they value add to that with things like free tyre check, they're going to actually, their average sale value won't be $100. It'll probably be more like $400 because I'll be selling at least 2 front tyres, because if you've got a wheel alignment problem, you've got a tyre wear problem. But anyway, let's put that aside. So understanding that it should be as independent as possible, and focus groups are a great way to do it, where you feed them lunch and talk to them about it and work through with them. That's an excellent, cheap way to do this. Outsourcing it can be expensive. It can cost you a lunch-based, fully facilitated workshop could cost you anywhere of upwards of $12,000 to get a really good job done. But you'll get all the questions answered, you'll get proper invigilation, you'll get everything you need. But if you can't afford that, then running it yourself with a lunch is the best way to do it, providing you're not telling people, you're not arguing your product is best. You don't actually talk about your product, and that's difficult for most inventors. Okay. Number 3, know the issues you can't control. These are those environmental issues that will impact on your project. I've talked about some of the ones with the pyramid of how you can control them. But now we're going to look at the pyramid is inside this. Issues you can control. Outside of there are issues that can impact on your development without you being able to control them. But if you don't address these, or you haven't looked at ways to mitigate it, control the risk, then people who are going to step up to jump into your project with you are going to recognize that you don't fully understand what you're getting into, and they will discount anything you say. So you need to have these covered off. So let's look at them. So you've got some touchy-feely ones like political, legal, regulatory, or social, societal. Political, legal, regulatory might be things like, for instance, the cannabis industry, very political. It's also very legal and has lots of regulations. So you need to comply with all of those before you start. Political, legal, and regulatory issues are independent of each other. Sometimes political ones could be that you just can't break it into an industry because, for instance, in Australia, we've got a lot of yellow cake uranium we could mine, but we don't, because politically we're restricted to just 2 mines in Australia. And everyone's gone out there and raised money. They know where the uranium is, but they won't mine it. And as a result, because until that politics changes, we're really a coal country. And that's really why the politics of this made it coal. So there's legal stuff. You may need to know you're going to comply with everything you do. Regulatory issues might be the cannabis industry is hellishly regulated, but there's others like the pharmacology. You have a new product, you need FDA or TGA approval. You're going to need to go through all of that with regulatory issues, and it can take years with trials. Social and societal, these can work with you or against you. You've got to be very careful that what your reputation is. And now I've done a project, I did it, albeit 25 years ago, with, and I can tell you now because it's no big secret, the company was Alcoa, a division of Alcoa called Alcoa of Australia. And we had a product coming out of a university called Tree Tech Australia. And it was clonal eucalyptus trees, which grew, we did seed selection over 5 years, bought and grew them out several generations to get trees that had 2 qualities. One, they would grow, or 3, they would grow straight so they could be harvested. Second, they were rapid growing. And third, they could grow in saline water. So we tested them up to 1.5 times the saline content of seawater. So these things could be planted into dry riverbeds or salt pans and actually regenerate the soils. Because once you stabilize the soil, the salt level goes down and the water is then potable. So that's what we did. Now, that company couldn't really sell those. They did want some for their mine site rehabilitation, but they put $2.1 million in. Now, that's a lot of money 25 years ago, and they did it for one reason. So they could stand up to the government at the time, which is probably 1989, and say, aren't we good commercial citizens? Aren't we good corporate citizens? Because we've just done this. Now, at the back of that, they had a big aluminum smelter, and they also had a mine for mining the whatever they bring out, I forget what it is now. But right in the middle of that, they found gold, and they found a lot of gold. And they had a lot of angst about this because Alcoa is a mining company for an aluminum smelter business. They don't do any other products, but they didn't want to let anyone else in on their tenement there. So they decided to lobby the government to see whether they could get this gold mine and make a gold mine right in the middle of their lease. And by this Corporate Citizen Act, they were able to do that. And they got that gold mine. And I can tell you now, I still remember in 1989, that gold mine is called Boddington Gold. It's still going. That reached profitability in 8 weeks. I've never heard any mine breaking even in 8 weeks, but they did that. So that gives you an idea how social and societal issues can impact on you, and you need to be aware of them. You're also buying into community things. There are people out there who invest in your project just to raise their profile if you've got a good corporate citizen profile. Location is important. If you can't break into other markets because of wars and geographic domain, a lot of other reasons, tribalism, you're going to have a location issue. You need to address that. You need to show people how you're going to address that. Economic, don't look at that with the financial, but economic, it might be that you're using a base metal. If you're building batteries for storage, you're relying on things like copper. You look at relying on other metals, precious metals, and they may be in short supply, or people may be buying them up long term, like 10 years worth of production, and therefore you can't break into it, and you've got an economic issue. You have to increase your price. It's competitive. How big are the competitors? If you're diving into an industry and everyone around you is multinational companies, it's going to be a real problem for you to break in. I'll give you an example there. I'd have one which I'm still doing. It was a paint, a very clever paint design, more of a membrane, which they could spray onto the roof of buildings, and the temperature underneath, and we've got a hot climate here. Buildings out in the desert need a lot of air conditioning, but if whatever the temperature was outside, this would be 8 degrees cooler inside. So they were able to reflect heat very, very efficiently. So that product was a paint product, but there are 4 major paint companies in the world, and all of them are multinationals, and they would crush anyone coming along. So they pick and choose who they're going to buy, and they crush everyone else. So these guys thought, how are we going to face them? So we decided not to sell paint. We decided to sell a service of paint. This paint also sealed roofs. So we went into the roof rehabilitation business, and we organized franchises, and our sticky core point was we provide the product. So that became a franchise. It's not rolled out yet, but it's still in the planning stages. Very good product. I recommend it. And they'll be selling the master franchising to other countries. That's Australian-based product, and that'll be selling master franchises elsewhere. Very good product. Okay. Technological, you're looking at how feasible is it? How much has other technology gone past you? How quickly could technology catch up with you? And you've got to address that and make sure you're not old school, because people won't invest in old school. Some will, they'll relate to it, but most won't. Excuse me. And then finally, financial. You need to know that you've got enough money. You're asking for the least amount of money you can to get cash flow positive, but you need to get to cash flow positive, because if you miss out, it's going to impact on you. So you need to have done budgeting and everything else. But we don't present budgets in a pitch for money, by the way. We only do 5 things, and they're not about this is how much. We don't do comprehensive cash flow forecasts and present pages and tables. We don't do any of that. So, and we get our funding. So there you go. So that's all these things you need to be aware of. Now, for those of you who have your phone close, you might want to take a photo of that. And that will give you a list of things you need to address before you get started. You don't have to have all the solutions to that. You won't overcome these. These are things that impact on you that you can't control, but you have to be able to address them and at least have a strategy to mitigate them. Okay, next, I want you to start with the end in mind. Now, for those of you who know Stephen Covey from Franklin Covey, prolific author out of Utah, Stephen wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective Managers, or something like that, highly effective people. Very good operator, very nice guy too. He's died a few years ago now, but he had a policy, start with the end in mind. It's absolutely most imperative with this. You have to plan your exit before you get started. So I want to just give you an idea of what an exit looks like, because we also refer to these as a value realization point. It's not getting out of the business. A lot of people think, do I have to sell what I've got? I like this. I want to be in it. You don't. You actually don't. But the people you bring in alongside you actually do. They're not in your business. They didn't get married to you. They're not there till death do you part. They're there for a period, and you need to give them that planned exit. Otherwise, they won't get on board. So how does this make sense? I'm going to put it to you this. Nobody wakes up in the morning and decides they need to take $1 million of their hard-earned cash and park it where they can't control it. So if you've been hunting for high net worth individuals and begging for them to jump into your project, the hunting and begging won't work. And the reason why it won't work is not only will these guys not want to do that, but all their advisors and employees will tell them that's a bad deal. You lose control of your money. And it doesn't work. But I show you ways in our funding where you don't actually have to do that. And you stack leverages, and it's not about return on investment. Once you make it not about return on investment, it's a lot easier. But if you don't have an exit, you don't have and the exit's got to include when, how, and how much. And if you can't be fairly certain about those 3 things, why would they get involved? And you can't say, oh, we're going to give you twice your money back in 2 years. You have to say, on this date, we're going to go to this company and we're going to cash in what we've got to, let's say for script rollover, we're going to give all our shares to, let's say Alcoa, and they're going to give us shares in their company. So we're going to be liquid because we have public listed shares, and you can exit or you can stay on board. But I'm probably going to go in as an employee and complete the project. So that can be available to you as well. Now, nobody wakes up and puts that money into a place where they can't control it for an indefinite time. And that's what a lot of people ask, on a promise by an amateur. Doesn't happen. Now, I can tell you, if you hunt and beg only with high net worth individuals, and you're talking return on investment, even if you get a yes, 4 to 6 weeks later, it'll be a no, because you'll still be in the due diligence period, and they'll say no. And there's a reason why they'll say no. And it's nothing to do with them or you or the project. is to do with the people around them who would otherwise control that $1 million will say, bad idea, get out of it. And they'll do everything they can to get them out of it. The reason for that, they would lose control of them at that $1 million or however much it is. And you don't want to be in that position where you can't control that environmental issue, which is the minders, the financial planners, financial controllers, the accountants, the lawyers, all that these guys takes advice from and trusts will tell him don't get involved, and for all the wrong reasons. We show you how to overcome that. But if you understand this, that nobody out there gets up and says, I've got $1 million, let's find some amateur and give it to them. Never going to happen. So what are your popular options to get your investor, your cornerstone investor, and your other people out? Well, the way we do it is these are the top 5 options. Public listing happens very rarely. I've given you an example where it did happen, and which is I use in week 4, and that's how we grew out a company. Then got it scaled by a public listed, by a venture capital firm in the aviation industry, and they actually funded that project as a result, got it going, and listed it within 12 months. So they backdoor listed it into an existing public company, and everyone cashed out. Very nice, because they got I think it was a $12 million a year deal with Boeing, and that's still going today. Australia provides these parts to Boeing under an offset program. Next, my favorite, trade sale, and usually it's not cash. It's, as I've just talked about, we script for script rollover. It's a nice, tidy way of doing it. You don't pay, in Australia, you wouldn't pay tax on that because you haven't realised the profit. So there's no capital gain. You just swap shares for shares. It's only when you start selling down that you actually get a capital gain. So if you hang on to that long enough, it mitigates it quite a bit. Okay, you can grow it out. That's a very slow way of doing it. Some people say, well, they confuse growing it out with scaling. I can tell you growing it out as scaling are 2 different things. Growing it out is where I say, I've made $4 million this year. I'll spend that $4 million on more branches in other states or other countries, and I'll start increasing, expanding that way. That's slow, it's profitable, but every dollar you get goes back into the business in order to maintain your growth before your competitors get hold of it. And if you do that, you're going to be in a situation where ultimately you're going to be fairly well cash starved for 10 years, and then you'll get a big payday at the end of it. Very rare does that pay off for anyone. Very hard to do. I don't recommend it because it's too slow. You can franchise. Franchising is a nice way to do it. If you've got a model like I had with this membrane on the roof, it lends itself very well to franchising. The money wasn't in the membrane itself. These guys did provide it, and they made their money from it, but they also did training and set up, coordinated the leads and got business. So very easy to do, very quick, and training people. They needed people with harness to get up on 3 floors and work on a roof, things like that. But mostly they were doing apartment buildings, shopping centres and the like, coating their roofs to seal them and also reflect heat, save money on air conditioning. For us in Australia, that's important. Licensing mostly happens with consumer products. It's a good way to go where somebody has the wherewithal to produce this and also to distribute it. Therefore, you should look at them as, I break it down and I say, would you like to produce this for me? And I'll let you white label it and use it yourself. And I'll charge you a license fee, but I still retain rights. And then later on, we give the entire thing to them and we just get a fee. Now, licensing is hard to police, particularly when you don't do one license for the world. You do license on geographic and sometimes geographic on demographic. So we break it down and you might have 360 licenses. That means you've got to audit those licenses every year to make sure they're not grey marketing, which is over producing and then telling you we only made 10,000 Nike shoes, but we actually made 22,000. We handed off the 10,000 to Nike, the rest we've kept, and we started selling them all over Asia. That happens. So licensing is the better way to do licensing, I find, is when we sit down, we nut it all out and say, you're going to do $100 worth of turnover, and I want to get $5 because I'm going to charge you 5% of wholesale. Therefore, my $5 a year is going to be worth this over 5 years, and we do 5 years with renewable. And excuse me again. Sorry, I got a bit of a tickle in my throat. And so if we do that, we know the product's going to be worth $25 over 5 years, we say, let's, if you go do a lot of sales and it ends up you owe me $35 or $45, that's great. But let's make it just a fixed $25 payable quarterly. And instead, I don't have to police it. And you're just going to pay me this. If you stop paying it, I take it back and we're all done. And if you do a $200 or $300 or $500 worth of sales, I'm still only going to get $5. But I've saved myself the price of audit and I've got a cash flow which should always sit there. So that's licensing. There's lots of tricks to that. So they are my 5 core exit options. I can tell you if you go with when you scale, if you do it with a venture capital company or a private equity fund, they will have their own exit and you'll just go along with that. And I tell you, they'll know the proper exit and they'll maximize it for themselves. And as you're an equity partner in the business that they're helping you run, it'll be the best you will get anyway. Okay, so